A small voice cut through the quiet cafe. "Mom, why does that man look like me?" The words weren't loud, but somehow they carried across the room and landed directly on Wayne Johnson like a sudden shock. For a second, the clinking of cups and the low murmur of conversations seemed to fade. Wayne's hand stopped halfway to his coffee. He hadn't planned on paying attention to anyone that morning. He rarely did. But something about the boy's voice made it impossible to ignore. Wayne slowly lifted his eyes. Across the cafe, a little boy sat at a table near the window. A half-eaten chocolate muffin rested on a napkin in front of him. Crumbs covered his fingers. The boy wasn't looking at the muffin anymore. He was staring straight at Wayne, pointing, and beside him sat a woman Wayne hadn't seen in 6 years. Amanda. She turned in her chair the moment she heard the question. Her eyes followed the direction of the boy's finger. And then she saw him. For a moment, Amanda didn't move. Her expression changed instantly. First confusion, then recognition, then something much deeper that Wayne couldn't quite name. Shock, maybe. The kind that freezes a person in place. Wayne felt his chest tighten, because the boy was still looking at him, studying him the way children often study strangers, openly, without hesitation. And that's when Wayne noticed the detail that made his stomach drop. The boy's eyes. Bright, clear, blue, not just any shade. The exact same shade Wayne had been seeing in the mirror his entire life. Wayne blinked slowly, trying to convince himself he was imagining it. Coincidences happen all the time. Thousands of people have blue eyes. But there was something else about the boy's expression, something familiar in the way he tilted his head slightly while observing Wayne, as if he were comparing two puzzle pieces. Amanda's gaze hadn't left Wayne's face. Neither of them spoke. They simply stared across the room at each other, while the boy waited for an answer to his question. "Mom?" the child asked again. Amanda inhaled slowly. Wayne could see the tension move through her shoulders. It had been years since they last stood in the same room. Back then, their lives had been connected in ways that felt permanent. Now they were strangers sharing the same space. Or at least that's what Wayne had believed until 30 seconds ago. The boy turned his head back toward Amanda. "Well?" he asked. "Why does he look like me?" Amanda's eyes closed briefly. Not long enough for anyone else in the cafe to notice. But Wayne noticed, because he knew that expression. Amanda only closed her eyes like that when she was bracing herself for something difficult. When she opened them again, she looked directly at Wayne. No anger, no smile, just a calm that carried years of unspoken history. Wayne felt his heartbeat begin to pound harder in his chest, because deep down, a possibility had already begun forming in his mind, a possibility that made the entire room feel smaller. 6 years. That's how long it had been since Wayne and Amanda ended their relationship. 6 years since the night she told him she wanted a future built around family. And 6 years since Wayne gave the answer that changed everything. "I don't want children." Those 4 words had ended the life they were building together. Amanda had walked away. Wayne had buried himself in work. And the story was supposed to end there. Except now, a little boy with Wayne's eyes was sitting 10 feet away calling her mom. Wayne slowly lowered his coffee cup onto the table. His mind raced through possibilities. Maybe the resemblance was coincidence. Maybe the boy simply shared similar features. Maybe... The boy suddenly waved. Not politely, not shyly, just a cheerful, curious wave, the way children greet strangers they find interesting. Wayne hesitated for a second. Then he lifted his hand and waved back. The boy grinned. Amanda watched the exchange quietly. Something in her expression shifted. Not surprise. Almost acceptance, as if this moment had always been inevitable. Wayne leaned back slightly in his chair, trying to steady his breathing. He had negotiated international contracts worth millions of dollars without losing composure. But right now, he felt like a man standing at the edge of a question he wasn't ready to answer. Because if the thought forming in his mind was true, then the life he believed he left behind had been growing without him. The boy took another bite of his muffin, still watching Wayne with interest. Amanda finally looked away and said something softly to him that Wayne couldn't hear. But her eyes returned to Wayne a second later. And the look they shared across the cafe carried more meaning than words could explain. 2 people who once loved each other, two lives that moved in completely different directions, and one unexpected connection sitting between them. Wayne Johnson had walked into the cafe expecting nothing more than a quiet cup of coffee before another day of business decisions. Instead, a single question from a child had just reopened a chapter of his life he thought was closed forever. 6 years ago, Wayne chose ambition over family. Now fate had placed him in a room with a little boy who looked exactly like him. And Wayne had no idea what that meant yet. But he knew one thing for certain. The ordinary morning he planned was already gone. Something far more important had just begun. Welcome back to Mr. Gerald Family. If stories about forbidden love and dangerous choices make your heart race, please support the channel by subscribing. Help me reach 1,000 subscribers so I can bring you more powerful stories that stay with you long after they end. Your support truly means a lot. Now let me take you back to the beginning. Because to understand how a successful CEO ended up sitting across from a child who might be his son, you need to know what happened 6 years earlier. 6 hours earlier, the morning had begun like any other for Wayne Johnson. Chicago's skyline sat under a dull gray sky as rain slid slowly down the glass walls of Wayne's penthouse apartment. From 30 floors above the city, the traffic below looked distant and orderly, like pieces moving across a board. Wayne stood near the window with a tablet in one hand and a cup of black coffee in the other. Numbers filled the screen: shipping routes, warehouse expansion plans, projected revenue from the company's newest distribution contract. For most people, those charts would have looked exhausting. For Wayne, they were familiar territory. He had spent the last decade building his logistics company from a risky startup into one of the fastest-growing delivery networks in the Midwest. Competitors watched his moves carefully. Investors trusted his instincts. Business magazines had begun using the same description whenever his name appeared in headlines. Strategic, relentless, visionary. Wayne rarely corrected them, because in many ways, it was true. He had built the company by working longer hours than anyone around him. While other entrepreneurs celebrated early success, Wayne kept expanding. New warehouses, new routes, new contracts. Sleep became a luxury he often ignored. Personal life became something he postponed. And over time, the postponement quietly turned into absence. Wayne set the tablet down on the kitchen counter and glanced at his phone. 3 new messages from senior managers. 2 meeting reminders. 1 investor asking for an update on a shipping partnership scheduled to launch next quarter. Wayne responded to each message quickly, his fingers moving across the screen with practiced speed. Efficiency had become second nature. After finishing the last reply, he placed the phone face down on the counter and looked around the apartment. The place was impressive by any standard. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, a kitchen larger than most people's entire apartments. Everything organized, everything clean, everything quiet, too quiet. Wayne rubbed his chin thoughtfully. Success had come faster than he expected. When he first started the company, he imagined one day reaching this level of financial freedom. But he had never imagined how empty the achievement might feel when there was no one around to share it with. The thought lingered for a moment before Wayne pushed it aside. Sentimentality wasn't productive. He finished the rest of his coffee, grabbed his coat from the chair near the door, and stepped into the hallway. The elevator ride down to the street was silent. Outside, the rain had settled into a steady drizzle. Cars moved slowly through morning traffic, while pedestrians hurried along the sidewalks with umbrellas tilted against the wind. Wayne usually went straight to the company office at this hour, but that morning, something made him change direction. Instead of heading toward the corporate tower where his team waited, he turned down a smaller street where a quiet cafe sat between 2 office buildings. It had become a routine stop whenever Wayne wanted a brief moment away from business conversations. Inside that cafe, no one cared about profit margins or delivery contracts. For 20 minutes, Wayne could simply sit with a cup of coffee and breathe. He pushed open the door. The small bell above it chimed softly. The familiar smell of roasted beans and warm pastries filled the room. A few early customers sat scattered around tables, some reading newspapers, others tapping on laptops. The barista greeted him with a nod. "Morning." Wayne returned the greeting. "Morning." He ordered his usual drink. Black coffee, nothing added. While waiting at the counter, Wayne's thoughts drifted somewhere he rarely allowed them to go. 6 years into the past. Back then, life had looked very different. Before investors, before company expansions, before the endless travel schedule. Back then there had been someone standing beside him through the uncertain early stages of the business. Amanda. She had met Wayne when the company was still operating from a small rented office with barely enough money to cover monthly expenses. Amanda never cared about the financial risk. She believed in people more than circumstances. Wayne remembered the first time she visited that cramped office space. Boxes stacked along the walls. Shipping maps taped to a whiteboard. A single desk cluttered with paperwork. Amanda had looked around the room and smiled. "This place doesn't look like much yet," she told him. "But I can tell you're building something big." Wayne laughed at the memory now. Amanda had always seen potential where others saw uncertainty. But Amanda also believed in something Wayne hadn't fully understood at the time: balance. She believed that ambition should exist alongside connection. Family dinners, weekend gatherings, time spent with people who mattered. Wayne respected that belief. But he didn't share it, not completely. Because inside his mind, success required total focus. Every hour invested, every opportunity pursued, and eventually that difference between them led to a conversation neither of them had planned. It happened one evening after Amanda mentioned something simple: a future, not immediately, but someday, a home filled with laughter, children running through the hallway, a life that included more than work. Wayne remembered sitting across from her at the kitchen table. The words came out before he fully realized how final they would sound. "I don't want children." Amanda didn't shout. She didn't argue. Instead, she sat quietly for several seconds, processing what he had said. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. "You're serious?" Wayne nodded. "I have too much I want to build right now. A family would change everything." Amanda studied his face carefully, not with anger, with disappointment. "Wayne," she said gently, "building a life isn't just about work." Wayne shook his head. "It is, for me." The silence that followed carried more weight than any argument could have, because in that moment, both of them understood the truth. They were standing at the edge of two completely different futures. Amanda stood from the table first. "I hope you get everything you're chasing," she said quietly. Wayne didn't respond, and that was the moment their relationship ended. No dramatic scene, no shouting, just a quiet goodbye that changed the direction of two lives. Back in the present, the barista slid Wayne's coffee across the counter. "Here you go." Wayne picked up the cup and nodded his thanks. He walked toward the corner table by the window, unaware that within minutes he would see Amanda again for the first time in 6 years. And sitting beside her would be a little boy whose existence would force Wayne to reconsider every decision he thought had defined his life. After Amanda left his life, Wayne Johnson did the only thing he knew how to do. He worked. At first, it felt like survival. Long hours inside a small office, phone calls that stretched late into the night, negotiations with clients who doubted a young entrepreneur running a logistics startup with more determination than resources. Back then, Wayne's company was little more than an idea supported by a handful of employees and a rented warehouse. There were weeks when the bank account sat dangerously close to empty, but Wayne never stopped pushing forward. Every rejection became motivation. Every obstacle became a problem waiting for a solution. While other companies expanded slowly, Wayne moved faster. He studied delivery routes across the Midwest. He noticed inefficiencies larger corporations ignored. He built a system designed to move goods quicker between cities that traditional networks treated as secondary markets. Within 2 years, the company secured its first major contract. A regional retailer trusted Wayne's system to manage their distribution. The risk paid off. Deliveries arrived faster than expected. Costs dropped. Word began spreading through the industry. More contracts followed. Warehouses expanded. Truck fleets multiplied. Investors started calling Wayne instead of the other way around. And just like that, the company Wayne once operated from a cluttered office became something far bigger. 5 years later, Wayne Johnson was no longer seen as an ambitious startup founder. He was seen as a force in the logistics industry. Business magazines started requesting interviews. Financial analysts discussed his company during market briefings. Competitors studied his strategies carefully. But success always demands something in return. For Wayne, the price was time. His calendar filled months in advance. Flights between cities became routine. Board meetings replaced quiet evenings. The company continued growing, but Wayne's world grew smaller in another way. Relationships faded. Old friendships turned into occasional text messages. Even weekends stopped feeling like weekends. Work had become the rhythm of his life. And for a long time, Wayne believed that rhythm was enough, until moments of silence started revealing something he had ignored. Late one evening, months before the cafe encounter, Wayne returned to his penthouse after a long trip to New York. The city lights stretched across the skyline outside his windows. The apartment was exactly the way he left it that morning. Perfectly organized, perfectly quiet. Wayne placed his suitcase near the door and loosened his tie. Usually, he would open his laptop immediately and continue reviewing reports before sleep. But that night, he paused. The silence inside the apartment felt heavier than usual. He walked into the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. No voices, no laughter, just the distant hum of traffic far below. Wayne leaned against the counter and stared at the empty dining table. The table was large enough to seat 8 people comfortably. Yet in the 3 years since he bought the apartment, no one had ever sat there for dinner with him. Not once. Wayne exhaled slowly. The realization didn't arrive with drama. It arrived quietly. The same way many truths appear in life. Success had given him control, stability, and recognition. But it had not given him connection. For years, Wayne had told himself that personal relationships could wait until the company reached a certain level of success. But that level kept moving. Every achievement led to a new goal. Every milestone opened another challenge. The finish line never stayed still. Wayne turned off the kitchen lights and walked toward the bedroom. He told himself the same thing he always did. Work came first. Everything else could wait. And for 6 years, that belief remained unchallenged. Until the morning he stepped into the cafe. Now, sitting at the corner table near the window, Wayne wrapped his hands around the warm coffee cup. The rain continued falling outside. People passed along the sidewalk without noticing the quiet drama unfolding inside. Across the room, Amanda sat with a little boy. James. Wayne knew the boy's name now. 6 years old. 6 years Wayne had spent building a company. 6 years James had spent growing up without him. The math settled heavily in Wayne's mind. He watched as James finished the last piece of his chocolate muffin. The boy seemed completely relaxed, curious about the world around him, unaware that his simple question had just forced Wayne to confront the one area of life he had avoided examining. Wayne had spent years building warehouses, delivery systems, and business partnerships. But sitting there in the cafe, he realized something impossible to ignore. He had built an empire, and in the process, he had left behind the one future Amanda once hoped they would build together. Wayne looked across the cafe again. Amanda had turned slightly toward James, speaking softly to him. Her expression carried patience, warmth, the quiet confidence of someone who had learned how to raise a child without expecting help. Wayne felt something unfamiliar settle inside his chest. Not regret exactly, something deeper. A question. What kind of life might exist if he had made a different choice 6 years earlier? James suddenly looked up and caught Wayne staring again. The boy smiled and waved a second time. Wayne returned the gesture without thinking. Across the table, Amanda noticed. Her eyes lifted slowly. For the second time that morning, Wayne and Amanda looked directly at each other across the cafe. 6 years had passed since their last conversation, yet the history between them still lingered in that single glance. And Wayne understood something clearly now. The quiet morning he expected when he walked into the cafe had disappeared, because the past he believed was finished had just returned, and sitting beside Amanda was living proof that the life Wayne chose to walk away from had continued without him. The quiet tension inside the cafe stretched for several seconds after Wayne and Amanda locked eyes. Neither of them moved at first. Across the table, the little boy continued eating his muffin, unaware that the adults around him were standing inside a moment heavy with 6 years of unfinished history. Wayne remained seated with both hands wrapped around his coffee cup. He hadn't expected to see Amanda again. Not today. Not ever. Life had moved forward too quickly for that. Yet here she was, only a few steps away. and sitting beside her was a child whose presence raised a question Wayne could not ignore. Amanda finally looked away from Wayne and turned toward the boy. "Stay right here for a minute," she said gently. The boy nodded without hesitation, focused on the muffin in his hands. "Okay." Amanda stood from the chair slowly. Her posture carried the same quiet confidence Wayne remembered from years ago. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. But Wayne could sense the weight behind each step as she began walking across the cafe toward him. The distance between them wasn't large, but it felt far longer than the few feet of floor separating their tables. Wayne rose from his chair as Amanda approached. It was an instinct he didn't even think about. For a man used to commanding boardrooms, facing Amanda again felt strangely different, more personal, more uncertain. Amanda stopped in front of him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Up close, Wayne could see the subtle ways time had changed her. There were small lines near her eyes that hadn't been there years ago. Not signs of age, signs of experience. Life had moved forward for her too. Amanda studied Wayne carefully. "You look exactly the same," she said finally. Wayne gave a small breath of laughter. "That's not entirely true." Amanda's expression softened slightly. "No," she said. "You look successful." Wayne understood the meaning behind the word. It wasn't praise. It was simply observation. "I've been busy," he replied. Amanda nodded once. "I can imagine." Silence settled between them again. Wayne glanced briefly toward the table where the boy sat. The child had finished the muffin and was now peeling the paper wrapper apart with focused curiosity. Amanda followed Wayne's gaze. Then she looked back at him. "I guess you're wondering the same thing he is," she said quietly. Wayne met her eyes. The directness of the moment left no room for small talk. He chose honesty. "How old is he?" Amanda didn't answer immediately. Instead, she studied Wayne's face, as if measuring the weight of the question. Then she spoke. 6. The word landed with quiet certainty. Wayne felt something shift inside him. His mind immediately began calculating. 6 years. Exactly the same amount of time since Amanda walked out of his life. The realization struck him before he could stop it. Wayne looked toward the boy again, then back at Amanda. His voice lowered. 6? Amanda held his gaze. Yes. Wayne's heart began beating harder. He had built companies, negotiated contracts, and handled crises involving millions of dollars. But this moment felt heavier than all of it. Because numbers suddenly meant something different. 6 birthdays. 6 years of growth. 6 years of memories Wayne had not been part of. Wayne swallowed slowly. His next words came out carefully. "Amanda." She waited. "Is he?" Wayne stopped before finishing the sentence. Amanda's eyes didn't leave his face. She knew exactly what he was trying to ask, but she didn't answer yet. Instead, she glanced briefly toward the boy. The child had begun swinging his feet beneath the chair while studying the cafe around him. Curious, relaxed, Amanda looked back at Wayne. And in that moment, Wayne understood something important. The conversation they were about to have would change more than one life. The silence between them carried the weight of 6 years of decisions. Wayne waited, and Amanda prepared to tell the truth that had remained unspoken since the day she walked away from him. Wayne remained standing across from Amanda, the quiet hum of the cafe surrounding them, while the weight of the moment settled between their words. He had asked the question. He had heard the number. 6. Now the meaning behind that number pressed heavily against his thoughts. Amanda studied his expression carefully. She could see the calculation happening behind Wayne's eyes. The same analytical mind that built a powerful company was now processing something far more personal. Wayne glanced toward the table again. The boy sat comfortably in his chair, still focused on the crumpled muffin wrapper. Every few seconds he folded it, flattened it, and folded it again, as if testing how the paper responded to pressure. Small, curious habits. Wayne noticed them immediately. He turned back to Amanda. His voice was quieter now. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question was not angry. It carried confusion more than anything else. Amanda didn't react immediately. She had known this question would arrive eventually. Instead of answering right away, she rested one hand lightly against the back of a nearby chair and looked at Wayne with steady calm. "Because you already gave me your answer," she said. Wayne frowned slightly. My answer? Amanda nodded. 6 years ago, Wayne knew exactly what she meant. The kitchen table, the quiet conversation, the moment he said the words that ended their future together. I don't want children. Amanda continued speaking before Wayne could respond. You were honest with me, she said. You told me the life you wanted didn't include a family. Wayne shifted his weight slightly. That doesn't mean I should have been kept in the dark. Amanda's expression didn't harden. She remained calm. Wayne, when I left that night, you had just signed your first major distribution contract. Your company was finally starting to grow. Wayne remembered. He remembered the excitement of that moment. The late nights preparing proposals. The relief of seeing the deal finally approved. Amanda folded her arms gently. You were already working 14 hours a day, she continued. Flying between cities, chasing new opportunities. She paused. And when I told you I wanted children someday, you made it clear that wasn't part of the future you were building. Wayne ran a hand across his forehead slowly. Amanda's voice stayed steady. I respected your honesty, she said. Even though it hurt. Wayne looked down briefly. The memory of that night returned sharply now. Not as a distant event, but as a decision whose consequences were standing 10 feet away in the form of a small boy. Amanda glanced toward the table again. The boy had now begun stacking sugar packets into a tiny tower. Carefully, patiently, Wayne followed her gaze. You raised him alone, he said quietly. Amanda shook her head immediately. No. Wayne looked back at her. I didn't raise him alone. Her voice carried quiet certainty. I had help. Wayne frowned slightly. From who? Amanda's expression softened. From the people who have always been part of my life. She leaned lightly against the chair. My mother was there from the beginning, she said. My sister helped with babysitting when I had to work late. Wayne listened. Amanda continued. Neighbors watched him when I needed an extra hour to finish a shift. Friends brought meals when things got overwhelming. She gestured gently with one hand. In the neighborhood where I grew up, raising a child is never just one person's responsibility. Wayne remembered those neighborhoods. Block gatherings during summer evenings. Music playing from open windows. Kids riding bikes down sidewalks while adults watched from porches. Amanda had always believed strongly in that kind of community. You once told me something, Wayne said slowly. Amanda raised an eyebrow. What was that? Wayne looked at her. You said wealth isn't measured by money. Amanda nodded slightly. It's measured by who shows up when life becomes difficult. Wayne exhaled quietly. I didn't understand that back then. Amanda gave a faint smile. No, she said. You didn't. The boy suddenly laughed softly at his own sugar packet tower collapsing. Amanda glanced toward him again, warmth filling her expression. Wayne watched that reaction carefully. The patience, the natural affection. Amanda had clearly grown into motherhood with confidence. Wayne returned his attention to her. What's his name? Amanda hesitated for a moment, not because she wanted to hide it, but because speaking the name out loud to Wayne felt like crossing another emotional line. Finally, she answered, James. The name settled in Wayne's mind immediately. James. A son. A boy he had never met until that morning. Wayne repeated the name quietly. James. Amanda nodded. Wayne looked across the cafe again. James had rebuilt the sugar packet tower and was now tapping it gently with one finger, testing how stable it was. Wayne watched him carefully. 6 years. 6 years of first words. First steps. First days of school. Moments that fathers usually witness. Moments Wayne had never even known existed. Amanda noticed the shift in his expression. You missed a lot, she said gently. Wayne didn't argue. He simply nodded. Yes, he said. The honesty in his voice surprised even him. Amanda studied Wayne carefully. She had spent years imagining how this conversation might happen if they ever crossed paths again. She had imagined anger, accusations, resentment. But Wayne's reaction wasn't any of those things. It was quieter, more reflective. Wayne leaned slightly closer. Does he know about me? Amanda considered the question carefully. No, she said. Wayne blinked. You never told him? Amanda shook her head. I told him his father once loved building things and chasing big dreams. Wayne listened silently. But I never explained the rest, she added. Why not? Amanda looked directly at him. Because that story isn't mine to finish. Wayne felt the meaning behind those words immediately. Amanda had left space in the story for him. If he ever returned, Wayne glanced toward James again. The boy had now noticed them watching and waved cheerfully. Wayne raised his hand in response. Amanda watched the exchange quietly. Then she said something that carried quiet weight. He's a good kid, Wayne. Wayne nodded. I can see that. Amanda held his gaze. And whether you decide to be part of his life or not, he deserves stability. Wayne understood the message clearly. This wasn't about guilt. It was about responsibility. And for the first time in many years, Wayne Johnson felt the true weight of a responsibility he had never planned for. The quiet understanding between Wayne and Amanda lingered for several seconds after their conversation ended. Across the cafe, the little boy had finished his sugar packet experiment and now looked around the room with restless curiosity. Children rarely sit still when their minds are active. His attention eventually returned to the two adults standing near the other table. James studied them carefully. He could see they were talking about something serious, though he couldn't hear the words. What he did notice was the way both of them kept glancing toward him. Curiosity began to win. James slid off his chair. The small movement caught Amanda's attention immediately. She watched as he walked toward them, his steps relaxed but purposeful. When James reached them, he stopped a few feet away and looked up at Wayne. For a moment he said nothing. He simply observed. Wayne realized that children have a way of studying people without pretending to be polite about it. They just look. And James was clearly comparing something in his mind. Wayne crouched slightly so he wouldn't tower over him. Up close, the resemblance became even more noticeable. The shape of the boy's face, the thoughtful way he examined things before speaking. James finally broke the silence. You're tall. Wayne blinked once, caught slightly off guard by the simplicity of the statement. Then he smiled. Yeah, I guess I am. James nodded seriously, as if confirming his own observation. For a few seconds he continued studying Wayne's face. Then he spoke again. You look like someone I know. Wayne felt his chest tighten slightly. Oh, he said. James nodded. Yeah. He folded his arms the way children sometimes do when thinking through a puzzle. Wayne waited. Then James finished the sentence, with quiet certainty. Me. Amanda let out a small breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The boy's honesty was both innocent and unsettling at the same time. Wayne couldn't help smiling slightly. That's an interesting observation, he said. James seemed pleased that Wayne took the comment seriously. I noticed details, he explained. Wayne glanced briefly at Amanda. She gave a faint shrug. He gets that from me, she said. James shook his head quickly. No. Mom says noticing details helps you understand things. Wayne nodded thoughtfully. She's right. James looked satisfied with that response. He stepped a little closer. What's your name? Wayne hesitated for half a second. It felt strange introducing himself to someone who might be his own child. But he answered calmly. Wayne. James repeated the name quietly, testing how it sounded. Wayne. Then he tilted his head slightly. That's a grown-up name. Wayne laughed softly. I suppose it is. James considered this for a moment before asking another question. What do you do? Wayne glanced briefly toward Amanda. She gave him a look that simply said, be honest. Wayne turned back to the boy. I run a company. James frowned slightly, trying to picture what that meant. What kind of company? We help move packages and supplies between cities. James's eyes brightened. Like trucks? Exactly. James nodded enthusiastically. My teacher says trucks are important because stores need deliveries. Wayne smiled. Your teacher is correct. James seemed impressed. He looked down at his hands briefly, then back up at Wayne again. Children rarely run out of questions. Do you build things too? Wayne paused. In a way, yes. What kind of things? Systems, Wayne replied. Ways to make work easier and faster. James thought about that answer carefully. It sounded complicated, but he still seemed interested. Then his curiosity returned to the detail that caught his attention earlier. You really do look like me, he said again. Wayne chuckled quietly. Maybe we just share good taste in hairstyles. James reached up and touched his curls thoughtfully. I didn't pick this haircut. Amanda laughed softly behind them. Trust me, I know. The conversation had started to feel surprisingly natural. Wayne found himself relaxing slightly. For years he had handled high-pressure negotiations with ease, but speaking with a child carried a completely different kind of responsibility. James suddenly noticed Wayne's coffee cup on the nearby table. You drink coffee? Wayne nodded. Every morning. James looked slightly impressed. My mom says coffee is only for adults. Amanda crossed her arms. That's because it is. James shrugged. It smells good. Wayne slid the cup slightly closer to him. Maybe someday when you're older. James accepted that answer easily. Then his curiosity shifted again. Do you live around here? Wayne nodded. Not far. James seemed satisfied for a moment. Then his next question arrived without warning. Do you have kids? The words landed softly, but carried weight far heavier than the boy realized. Wayne felt the question settle deep inside his chest. Amanda watched the moment closely. James waited patiently. For him, it was just another question. For Wayne, it was the first time he had ever been asked that question by the one person who mattered most. Wayne looked directly into the boy's bright blue eyes. For several seconds he didn't answer. Because in that moment, the truth was far more complicated than a simple yes or no. And Wayne Johnson knew that whatever answer he gave next would begin shaping the future between them. The question James asked hung in the air between them. Do you have kids? For James, it was just curiosity. For Wayne, the moment felt heavier than anything he had faced in a boardroom. Wayne didn't answer immediately. He looked at the boy standing in front of him. Small hands, curious eyes. A child who had no idea that his simple question had just opened a most complicated conversation of Wayne's life. Amanda remained quiet behind them. She understood that whatever happened next had to unfold naturally. James noticed the hesitation. Is that a hard question? He asked. Wayne let out a small breath. Sometimes simple questions take longer to answer. James considered that explanation carefully. Then his attention shifted toward Amanda. Children are observant, and James had already noticed something unusual about the way the two adults were behaving. They looked at each other differently, carefully, as if there was a secret conversation happening even when they weren't speaking. James turned toward Amanda. Mom? Amanda stepped closer. Yes? James pointed toward Wayne. Is he my dad? The cafe noise continued around them, but for Wayne and Amanda the world seemed to pause. Amanda didn't answer right away. She looked at Wayne first, not asking permission, but acknowledging the weight of the moment. Wayne held her gaze. 6 years of choices rested inside this single question. Amanda slowly returned her attention to James. Her voice remained calm. Yes. James blinked. That means he's my dad? Amanda nodded gently. Yes. James turned back toward Wayne. He didn't panic. He didn't react with confusion the way many adults might expect. Instead, he simply looked at Wayne more closely. Children accept information faster than adults. For them, the world constantly changes as they grow. James tilted his head slightly. You're my dad. Wayne swallowed slowly. The word landed deeper than anything he had expected. Dad. A title he had never imagined hearing directed at him. Yes, Wayne said quietly. James processed the information with surprising calm. Then another question appeared in his mind, a much more important one. He looked straight at Wayne. Where were you? The question was simple, direct, but it carried 6 years of absence inside it. Wayne didn't look away. He knew this was a moment where honesty mattered more than comfort. I was working, he said. James frowned slightly. Working where? Wayne chose his words carefully. I was building a company. James thought about that for a moment. Was it important? Wayne felt the weight of the answer before speaking. I thought it was. James looked down at the floor for a few seconds, thinking. Children often pause while trying to understand adult explanations. Then he looked up again. And you didn't know about me? Wayne shook his head slowly. No. James glanced briefly at Amanda. She gave a small nod, confirming the truth. Wayne continued speaking gently. Your mom and I stopped seeing each other before you were born. James listened carefully. Wayne added something important. But if I had known you were here, I would have wanted to meet you. James studied Wayne's face again, trying to decide if the answer felt real. After a moment, he seemed satisfied. Then he asked another question. Are you still building that company? Wayne nodded. Yes. James thought about that. Then he asked quietly, is it bigger than me? The question caught Wayne off guard, because James didn't ask it in a jealous way. He asked it with genuine curiosity. Wayne shook his head slowly. No. James tilted his head again. It sounded important. Wayne looked directly at him. Some things feel important until you realize what you were missing. James didn't fully understand the meaning behind that sentence, but he could tell it mattered. The little boy nodded slowly, and the moment between them continued unfolding in ways none of them had expected when the morning began. The quiet tension that followed Wayne's answer settled gently over the small space between them. James stood in front of him, absorbing everything he had just heard. The cafe continued moving around them, cups clinking against saucers, chairs sliding across the floor, a low hum of conversation. But none of it seemed to reach the three people standing in that moment. Wayne remained crouched so he could look at James at eye level. He didn't want to tower over the boy. He didn't want to feel distant. For the first time in years, Wayne Johnson found himself in a situation where business logic offered no guidance. There was no strategy for a moment like this, no negotiation tactic, no prepared speech, just honesty. James shifted his weight from one foot to the other, thinking. Children often process big ideas differently from adults. They don't rush to complicated conclusions. Instead, they test one simple thought at a time. After several seconds, James finally spoke. So you didn't know about me? Wayne shook his head gently. No. James nodded slowly, as if placing that fact somewhere inside his understanding of the world. Then he glanced up at Amanda. Mom didn't tell you? Amanda answered softly. No. James looked back at Wayne again. You were building your company. Wayne nodded once more. Yes. Another pause followed. Wayne expected more questions, maybe confusion, maybe disappointment. Instead, James said something that Wayne never expected. You're here now. The words were simple, matter of fact, but they carried a quiet weight that made Wayne feel something tighten deep inside his chest. For 6 years, Wayne had believed he missed something that could never be recovered. Yet here stood a child who seemed willing to judge him based on the present instead of the past. Wayne swallowed slowly. I am, he said. James nodded, satisfied with the answer. Then he did something even more surprising. He smiled, not a big dramatic smile, just a small, relaxed one that children give when a problem seems less confusing than they first thought. Amanda watched the exchange carefully. She had prepared herself for many possible reactions from James if the truth ever came out. Questions, fear, even anger. But James had responded with calm curiosity instead. Still, Amanda didn't relax completely. Forgiveness can come easily to children, but trust must grow over time. Wayne understood that without her needing to say it. James glanced around the cafe again before looking back at Wayne. So, if you're my dad, does that mean you know how to fix things? Wayne blinked. Fix things? James nodded enthusiastically. My toy robot stopped working yesterday. Wayne couldn't help smiling. Well, I'm not sure I'm an expert with robots. James crossed his arms thoughtfully. But you build systems, right? Wayne chuckled softly. That's true. James seemed satisfied with that connection. Then maybe you can figure it out. Amanda shook her head lightly, amused by how quickly James had moved from serious questions to everyday concerns. Wayne noticed it too, and strangely, it made the moment feel more real. James wasn't trying to solve the emotional complexity of the situation. He was simply accepting a new fact about his life and continuing forward. Wayne stood up slowly from his crouched position. Even as he straightened, he remained focused on the boy. James tilted his head again, studying Wayne's face with the same careful curiosity he had shown earlier. You look different than I imagined. Wayne raised an eyebrow. You imagined me? James nodded. Sometimes Mom talks about you. Wayne glanced briefly at Amanda. She held his gaze, but didn't explain further. Wayne turned back to James. What did you imagine? James thought for a moment. I thought you would be older. Wayne laughed quietly. I get that sometimes. James smiled again. Then he asked another question. Do dads usually drink coffee? Wayne glanced at the cups sitting on the table nearby. Most of them probably do. James seemed to accept that explanation. Then his attention shifted toward the window, where the rain had started again. Small drops tapped gently against the glass. The boy watched the pattern for a moment before speaking again. So, if you didn't know about me before, what happens now? The question landed softly but carried enormous meaning. Wayne didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, he didn't fully know yet. What he did know was that the moment standing in front of him mattered more than any meeting waiting on his schedule. Wayne looked at James carefully. What do you think should happen? James shrugged. I don't know. Then he smiled again. But, you're here now. The simplicity of the statement hit Wayne harder than any complicated conversation could have. Amanda noticed the shift in Wayne's expression. For the first time since their reunion in the cafe, Wayne looked less like a businessman analyzing a situation, and more like a man realizing something important. James had offered something rare. Not complete trust, not automatic acceptance, but a chance. And chances are something Wayne Johnson had always believed in. The difference now was that this chance had nothing to do with money, companies, or success. It had everything to do with a small boy standing in front of him. The quiet moment between them lingered after James said the words, "You're here now." The boy didn't say it as a question. To him, it sounded like a simple fact. For Wayne, the statement carried far more weight. For years he had believed time was something he controlled. Every hour scheduled, every meeting planned, every decision calculated for the future. Yet standing inside that cafe, Wayne realized something unsettling. The most important moment of his life had arrived without warning, and it involved a small boy who had just entered his world less than 30 minutes earlier. James looked around the cafe again, his curiosity returning to the ordinary details of the morning. A barista carried fresh pastries to the display case. Someone laughed softly at another table. Outside the window, rain continued falling over the Chicago streets. Life moved normally for everyone else, but for Wayne, everything felt different now. James turned back toward him. So, what happens next? The question sounded innocent, but Wayne knew it deserved a real answer. He crouched slightly again so he could speak to James at eye level. Well, Wayne said slowly, I think the first thing that happens is we get to know each other. James nodded immediately. That makes sense. Amanda watched the conversation carefully. She stood nearby, arms folded loosely, observing every word. She wasn't interrupting, but Wayne could feel the responsibility in her silence. James deserved stability. Amanda had built that stability over the last 6 years. If Wayne entered their lives again, it had to be real. James suddenly looked toward Amanda. Mom, don't I have school soon? Amanda glanced at the clock on the wall. Yes, she said. In about 20 minutes. James looked back at Wayne quickly. Then another thought crossed his mind. Children rarely hold questions inside. They simply ask, Are you coming back tomorrow? The words came out casually, but for Wayne, the question struck deeper than anything else that morning. For most of his life, Wayne had avoided commitments that limited his time. His company demanded flexibility. Travel schedules changed weekly. Important meetings often appeared without warning. Wayne had always structured his life around that unpredictability. But now a 6-year-old boy stood in front of him, asking something very simple. Not a contract, not a negotiation, just a promise. Wayne glanced briefly at Amanda. She met his eyes, but didn't speak. She wasn't going to answer this question for him. This decision belonged entirely to Wayne. James waited patiently. The boy wasn't demanding anything. He simply wanted to know if the man who might be his father planned to show up again. Wayne looked back at him. Yes, he said. James's eyes brightened slightly. Really? Wayne nodded. Yes. I'll come back tomorrow. The answer came without hesitation, and for the first time in years, Wayne realized something surprising. He didn't feel trapped by the promise. He felt relieved. James smiled widely. Good. The boy seemed satisfied with that. He picked up his small backpack from the chair where he had left it earlier. Amanda watched Wayne closely. Promises are easy to make. Keeping them is something else entirely. She spoke calmly. James and I usually stop here before school. Wayne nodded. I'll remember that. James slipped one strap of the backpack over his shoulder. Then he paused and looked at Wayne again. "Tomorrow I can show you my science notebook." Wayne smiled. "I'd like that." James seemed pleased. He looked toward the door, where the rain still fell steadily outside. Then he turned back to Wayne once more. "You should try the chocolate muffins," he said seriously. Wayne laughed quietly. "I'll keep that in mind." Amanda stepped closer to James and gently adjusted the backpack on his shoulders. "All right," she said. "Time to go." James nodded. But before leaving, he looked up at Wayne again. Not with uncertainty, not with suspicion, just simple curiosity about the man who had suddenly appeared in his life. "Bye, Wayne." Wayne raised his hand slightly. "Bye, James." Amanda placed her hand lightly on James's shoulder as they began walking toward the door. Halfway there, she stopped. Then she turned back toward Wayne. The cafe noise filled the space between them again. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. 6 years earlier, they had parted ways, believing their futures would never cross again. Now a child had quietly changed everything. Amanda spoke softly. "Tomorrow matters." Wayne nodded. "I know." She studied his expression carefully, searching for any sign of hesitation. She didn't find it. Amanda gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Then she turned again and walked toward the door with James. The bell above the entrance chimed as they stepped outside into the rain. Wayne remained standing beside the table. His coffee had gone cold. His phone vibrated quietly inside his coat pocket, reminding him that the rest of the world still expected his attention. Meetings, decisions, deadlines. But Wayne didn't reach for the phone. Instead, he looked toward the door, where Amanda and James had just left. For the first time in a long time, Wayne Johnson realized something important. The most meaningful promise he had made in years had nothing to do with business. It was a promise to return. And tomorrow morning would be the first test of whether he truly intended to keep it. The next morning arrived faster than Wayne expected. For years, his mornings followed a predictable rhythm. Emails before sunrise, calls with managers in different cities, strategy discussions before most people had finished breakfast. But that morning felt different. Wayne woke up before his alarm and stared at the ceiling of his penthouse for a few seconds. The promise he made the day before replayed clearly in his mind. "I'll come back tomorrow." A simple promise, but it carried more weight than any contract he had ever signed. Wayne sat up and reached for his phone. Several notifications waited for him. Messages from his executive team, reminders about meetings, a request from investors asking for updates on a new distribution center. Normally, he would respond immediately. Instead, Wayne placed the phone back on the nightstand. Those conversations could wait. The one that mattered most was happening somewhere else. Less than an hour later, Wayne pushed open the cafe door. The bell above it chimed softly. The smell of fresh coffee greeted him the same way it had the day before. But this time, Wayne noticed something unusual. He felt nervous. He had spoken to thousands of people in his career without hesitation. Yet waiting for a 6-year-old boy suddenly felt more important than any business meeting. Wayne chose the same table near the window. He ordered the same black coffee. And then, he waited. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Wayne watched the door every time it opened. Finally, the bell chimed again. Amanda stepped inside. James walked beside her, wearing a small backpack. The moment James spotted Wayne, his face lit up. "You came back." Wayne couldn't help smiling. "I said I would." James ran toward the table with the excitement only children can show so openly. "I brought my science notebook," he announced proudly. Wayne gestured toward the seat across from him. "Let's see it." James climbed into the chair and pulled a small spiral notebook from his backpack. Inside were drawings, magnets pulling toy cars, arrows showing direction, carefully labeled ideas written in uneven handwriting. Wayne studied the pages seriously. "What are you testing here?" he asked. James leaned forward eagerly. "If magnets can move cars without touching them." Wayne nodded thoughtfully. "That's a good experiment." Amanda watched from her seat quietly. She expected Wayne to smile politely and move on. Instead, he began asking questions. "What kind of magnets are you using? Do the cars move faster on smooth surfaces?" James answered every question with enthusiasm. The conversation continued until Amanda checked the clock. School bus in 5 minutes, she reminded him. James sighed, but began packing his notebook. Before leaving, he looked at Wayne again. Will you be here tomorrow? Wayne nodded. Yes. The next morning, Wayne returned again, and the morning after that, days slowly turned into weeks. The cafe became a small routine shared by 3 people whose lives had once been completely separate. Wayne learned about James's school projects. James asked endless questions about how delivery trucks worked. Some mornings they talked about magnets and machines. Other mornings, James described playground adventures or new books his teacher introduced. Wayne listened to every story carefully, not with the distracted attention adults sometimes give children, but with real curiosity, Amanda noticed. At first she remained cautious. Anyone can appear committed for a few days, but consistency reveals the truth. Week after week, Wayne continued showing up, always before the school bus arrived, always ready to listen. The routine slowly became natural. James began saving new questions for their morning conversations. Once he asked why birds fly in groups. Another time, he asked how bridges hold so much weight. Wayne didn't pretend to know every answer. Sometimes he admitted uncertainty, but he always helped James think through the questions, and little by little, a bond began forming between them. Amanda saw it happening, and while she never rushed to celebrate it, she couldn't ignore the steady change taking place. Wayne Johnson, the man who once said he didn't want children, was now rearranging his life around 30 minutes each morning with his son. The promise he made in the cafe had turned into something more than a single visit. It had become a habit, and habits have a way of quietly reshaping lives. Several weeks after the morning routine at the cafe began, something small but meaningful happened. James finished his muffin one morning and looked up at Wayne with the same thoughtful expression he often used before asking a question. Do you ever come to my neighborhood? He asked. Wayne paused. The question sounded simple, but it carried an invitation. Not yet, Wayne admitted. James nodded, as if he had expected that answer. You should, he said. There's a basketball hoop near our building, and the ice cream truck comes every Friday. Amanda glanced at Wayne quietly. James spoke again, more excited now. And sometimes people play music outside during the evening. Wayne smiled. That sounds like a lively place. James leaned forward. It is. Amanda finished her coffee and stood up. We should get going, she said, checking the time. James slid down from his chair and grabbed his backpack. But before leaving, he turned back to Wayne. You can visit sometime. Wayne nodded. I'd like that. The invitation stayed in Wayne's mind for the rest of the day. Late that evening, after finishing a long meeting at the office, Wayne sat in his car outside Amanda's neighborhood. The contrast with his own surroundings was impossible to miss. Wayne's penthouse overlooked glass towers and busy highways. Here, the streets felt smaller, closer. Apartment buildings lined both sides of the block, their windows glowing warmly in the early evening light. Music played softly from somewhere down the street. Children rode bicycles along the sidewalk, while a group of teenagers bounced a basketball near a small park. Wayne stepped out of the car. The air carried the smell of grilled food drifting from someone's backyard. People stood outside talking to each other, like they had known one another for years. As Wayne walked down the sidewalk, he noticed something else. No one seemed rushed. Conversations lingered. Neighbors greeted each other casually. Someone waved across the street. It felt completely different from the fast-moving world Wayne lived in every day. A familiar voice suddenly called out, Wayne. He turned. James ran toward him with excited energy. You came, Wayne laughed. I said I would visit. Amanda followed a few steps behind him. She folded her arms lightly as she watched Wayne take in the surroundings. Different from your office towers, she said. Wayne looked around again. Yes, he admitted. James tugged at Wayne's sleeve. Come see the basketball hoop. He led Wayne toward the small park nearby. A group of kids were taking turns shooting. The metal hoop rattled each time the ball hit the rim. James grabbed a loose basketball and handed it to Wayne. Try. Wayne looked at the hoop. It's been a while. James grinned. That's okay. Wayne bounced the ball once, then shot. The ball hit the backboard and dropped cleanly through the net. James cheered immediately. Nice. Wayne laughed. Beginner's luck. Amanda watched from the bench nearby. The scene felt strangely natural. Wayne standing in a neighborhood park, James running around him with excitement. Something about the moment softened the guarded expression Amanda had carried since the cafe meeting. Wayne sat beside her for a moment while James played. "You built something good here," Wayne said quietly. Amanda followed his gaze toward the street. Kids laughing, neighbors talking, someone grilling food on a small patio. "It's just people looking out for each other," she replied. Wayne nodded slowly. "I used to think success meant being independent." Amanda raised an eyebrow. "And now?" Wayne watched James dribble the basketball clumsily. "Now I'm starting to think community might matter more." Amanda didn't answer right away, but the corner of her mouth lifted slightly. James ran back toward them. "Did you see that shot?" Wayne nodded. "Impressive." James grinned proudly. "Tomorrow I'll show you the science project I'm building." Wayne stood up. "I'll be there." As the evening continued, Wayne realized something important. For years he had believed Amanda's world was smaller than his. But standing in that neighborhood, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about each other, Wayne began to understand something he had missed before. Amanda hadn't built a smaller life. She had built a stronger one. And if Wayne wanted to be part of James's future, he would need to understand that world as well. A few days after Wayne's first visit to the neighborhood park, the evening routine between the three of them began to feel more natural. Wayne still met Amanda and James at the cafe most mornings before school. But now, once or twice a week, Wayne also stopped by the neighborhood in the evening. Sometimes they played basketball near the park. Other nights, Wayne helped James test small science ideas from his notebook. One evening, James had brought a cardboard car powered by a stretched rubber band. He placed it carefully on the sidewalk outside the apartment building. "Watch this," James said proudly. Wayne crouched beside him, while Amanda sat on the steps nearby. James twisted the rubber band tightly before releasing the small car. The toy shot forward across the pavement before slowing to a stop. James jumped up with excitement. "It went farther this time." Wayne nodded. "That means your design is improving." James picked up the toy car and studied it closely. "I think the wheels are straighter now," he said. Wayne smiled. "That usually helps." Amanda watched the two of them quietly. She had spent years raising James on her own, solving problems without expecting help. Now she saw something new forming between them. Wayne didn't act like a visitor. He listened carefully. He asked questions. He gave James the same attention he might give a business project. But there was something warmer in his voice now, something more patient. James ran back to the starting spot again. "I want to try one more time." Wayne nodded. "Go for it." James twisted the rubber band again, concentrating hard. This time he positioned the car more carefully. When he released it, the toy rolled even farther across the pavement. James raised both arms in victory. "Did you see that?" Wayne laughed. "That might be a new record." James ran back to Wayne, holding the toy proudly. "You helped." Wayne shook his head. "You did the work." James seemed to think about that for a moment. Then he looked up at Wayne again. "Can we make a faster one tomorrow?" Wayne answered without hesitation. "Of course." James turned toward Amanda briefly. "Mom, did you see how far it went?" Amanda smiled. "I saw." The evening air felt calm. Streetlights flickered on one by one as the sky darkened. Somewhere nearby, music played softly from an open window. Children continued riding bikes down the block, while adults talked near the sidewalks. Wayne stood up slowly. "Looks like you've got a future in engineering," he said. James tilted his head. "What's engineering?" Wayne thought for a moment. "People who design things that solve problems." James seemed to like that answer. "I like solving problems." Wayne nodded. "I can tell." James looked down at the toy car again, examining the wheels carefully. Then he pointed at one of them. "Dad, look at this." The word left his mouth naturally, not dramatic, not planned, just part of the sentence. For a moment, Wayne didn't move. He simply stood there staring at James. The single word echoed quietly inside his mind. "Dad." James continued examining the toy, unaware that he had just crossed an emotional line. "See?" he said, pointing at the wheel. "It's a little crooked." Wayne slowly crouched beside him again. His voice came out softer than before. "You're right." James adjusted the wheel slightly. That should help. Amanda noticed the moment immediately. She saw the way Wayne's expression changed. The word had landed with unexpected force. Wayne didn't interrupt James. He didn't correct him. He simply stayed focused on the toy car while the emotions settled inside him. For years, Wayne had avoided the idea of fatherhood. He believed it would restrict his freedom. Now the word had arrived without pressure, without obligation, just spoken naturally by a child who had slowly grown comfortable with him. James rolled the toy car forward again. Try pushing it. Wayne did. The wheels moved smoothly across the pavement. Better, Wayne said. James nodded proudly. Amanda stood from the steps and walked toward them. She looked at Wayne carefully. You heard that? Wayne met her eyes. Yes. Amanda didn't smile. But the guarded distance she once carried had softened slightly. Trust wasn't automatic. But the moment mattered. James looked up again. Are you coming tomorrow morning? Wayne nodded. I wouldn't miss it. James seemed satisfied with that answer. He picked up the toy car and ran toward the apartment door. I'm going to write down the new distance. Amanda watched him disappear inside the building. Then she turned back to Wayne. That word carries responsibility, she said quietly. Wayne understood. I know. Amanda studied his expression for a moment longer. Then she nodded once. For the first time since Wayne re-entered their lives, the word dad no longer sounded like a possibility. It sounded like the beginning of something real. The morning after James called him dad, Wayne woke earlier than usual. The city outside his penthouse windows was still dark, the early light barely touching the tops of Chicago's skyscrapers. For years, Wayne had followed the same routine. Wake up, check messages, start responding before sunrise. His company operated across multiple time zones, which meant someone somewhere was always waiting for an answer. But that morning, Wayne didn't reach for his phone right away. Instead, he sat quietly on the edge of the bed, thinking about the previous evening. James crouched on the sidewalk beside the small toy car. The casual way the boy said the word dad. Not forced, not awkward. Just natural. The moment replayed clearly in Wayne's mind. For most of his life, Wayne believed success meant control. Control over time. Control over outcomes. Control over every decision that shaped his future. But that single word from James had introduced something Wayne had never planned for. Responsibility that could not be scheduled. Responsibility that could not be delegated. Wayne finally reached for his phone. Dozens of notifications waited. Emails, meeting reminders, messages from executives across several departments. Normally, Wayne would begin answering them immediately. Instead, he opened a different conversation thread. His senior operations director. Wayne typed a short message. I want to move today's leadership meeting to the afternoon. You can handle the morning briefing. A few seconds later, the reply arrived. Everything okay? Wayne looked at the message for a moment. Then he responded. Yes, just adjusting priorities. He set the phone down again. The adjustment seemed small, but for Wayne, it represented something larger. For years, his company had depended on his presence for every important decision. He had built the organization that way. But maybe it didn't need to stay that way. Later that morning, Wayne walked into the company headquarters. The office occupied several floors of a modern glass building overlooking the river. Employees moved through the lobby carrying laptops and folders. Some nodded politely as Wayne passed. Others greeted him with brief updates about ongoing projects. Inside the executive conference room, several managers were already waiting. Charts filled the screen on the wall. Logistics routes, delivery efficiency numbers, projected expansion plans. Wayne listened carefully as one of the managers finished presenting. Normally, he would lead the discussion afterward, but this time Wayne leaned back in his chair. You've got this, he said calmly. The room fell quiet for a moment. One of the managers blinked. You want us to finalize the plan? Wayne nodded. That's why you're here. The conversation continued, but Wayne noticed something interesting. The team handled the decisions confidently. They asked each other questions. They solved problems together. For years, Wayne had assumed the company needed his constant oversight. Now he realized something important. He had hired capable people. And capable people could lead when given the opportunity. After the meeting ended, Wayne walked back to his office. Through the large windows, he could see the city stretching in every direction. For the first time in a long while, Wayne didn't feel pressure to fill every minute with work. Instead, he checked the time. James would be finishing school soon. Wayne closed his laptop. He grabbed his coat. And for once, leaving the office early didn't feel irresponsible. It felt necessary. Later that afternoon, Wayne arrived near Amanda's neighborhood park. James spotted him immediately. "Dad!" The word came again, just as naturally as before. James ran toward him holding the same toy car from the night before. "I fixed the wheel." Wayne crouched down to examine it. "Let's see how it performs." James placed the toy car carefully on the pavement. He twisted the rubber band and released it. The car rolled smoothly across the sidewalk, even farther than before. James cheered. "It worked." Wayne smiled. "Yes, it did." Amanda stood nearby watching them. Wayne glanced up at her briefly. Something about the moment felt simple in a way Wayne had never experienced before. No investors, no deadlines, just a small success shared between a father and his son. And Wayne began realizing something clearly. For years he had believed building a powerful company was the most meaningful thing he could accomplish. But standing there beside James, Wayne understood that success without family had always been incomplete. And now he had a second chance to change that. Over the next several weeks, Wayne's presence became something steady in James's life. At first, Amanda watched everything carefully, not with hostility, but with the quiet awareness of someone who had spent years protecting her child. Trust, in Amanda's world, wasn't given quickly. It was earned through consistency, and consistency takes time. Every morning, Wayne still arrived at the cafe before school. Sometimes he arrived early enough to order 3 muffins before Amanda and James walked through the door. James quickly made it a habit to run toward the table as soon as he saw him. "Dad, guess what happened yesterday?" There was always a new story. A science lesson. A playground adventure. A small discovery about the world that seemed incredibly important to a 6-year-old mind. Wayne listened to every word. Not distracted. Not checking his phone. Just listening. Amanda noticed that detail first. In the past, Wayne had always been busy. Meetings. Phone calls. Deadlines. Now when James spoke, Wayne's attention stayed completely on him. The change wasn't dramatic, but it was real. One afternoon, Amanda arrived early at the park while James and Wayne were testing another toy experiment. The cardboard car had evolved into something slightly more complicated. James had attached a small piece of plastic to the front to reduce friction. Wayne crouched beside him, adjusting the rubber band carefully. "Try launching it from this angle," Wayne suggested. James released the car. It rolled across the pavement faster than before. James jumped with excitement. "That worked." Wayne nodded. "Your design keeps improving." Amanda watched from the bench quietly. Moments like this had started happening regularly. Wayne wasn't showing up with expensive gifts or trying to impress James with wealth. Instead, he brought patience. He brought curiosity. He brought time. Those things mattered more. Later that evening, James ran inside the building to grab his notebook. For the first time in a while, Wayne and Amanda were alone outside. The quiet streetlights flickered on as the sky darkened. Amanda looked at Wayne carefully. "You've been rearranging your schedule." Wayne leaned slightly against the railing beside the steps. "I delegated some responsibilities." Amanda studied him. "You used to believe no one else could handle the company the way you did." Wayne gave a small smile. "I was wrong about that." Amanda folded her arms loosely. "And about other things?" Wayne didn't avoid the meaning behind the question. "Yes." The honesty in his voice surprised her. Amanda looked down the street, where a few children rode bikes past the park. "For years," she said quietly, "I assumed the company would always come first." Wayne nodded. "It did." Amanda looked back at him. "And now?" Wayne thought about the answer before speaking. "Now I'm realizing something." Amanda waited. Wayne continued calmly. "Success only feels meaningful when someone important shares it with you." Amanda remained silent for a moment. Not because she disagreed, but because hearing Wayne say it out loud carried more weight than she expected. James suddenly burst through the apartment door again. "I found the notebook." He ran back toward them, holding the pages open. Wayne crouched again to examine the new drawing. Amanda watched quietly as the two of them began discussing the next improvement for the toy car. For the first time in 6 years, Amanda allowed herself to imagine something she had long ago stopped considering. Maybe Wayne's presence in James's life wouldn't be temporary. Maybe the change she was seeing wasn't guilt. Maybe it was growth. But Amanda remained careful. Trust built slowly. Still, she could not deny what she saw happening in front of her. Wayne kept showing up, day after day, morning after morning. And in a child's world, that kind of consistency means everything. As James excitedly explained his newest design idea, Amanda realized something quietly. Wayne wasn't trying to return to the past. He was trying to become the father James deserved now. And slowly, one small moment at a time, Amanda began to believe it might be possible. Several months passed before Wayne fully understood how much his life had changed. The transformation did not happen in one dramatic moment. It happened gradually. Morning conversations at the café, evening experiments in the park, short walks to the bus stop before school, small routines that slowly reshaped Wayne's priorities. His company continued operating successfully. Delivery routes expanded, new clients signed contracts, but Wayne noticed something interesting. The company no longer required his constant presence. The leadership team he had built handled most decisions effectively. Meetings that once demanded his attention now happened without him. And the world didn't collapse. For years, Wayne believed his company could not function unless he controlled every detail. Now he realized something important. Leadership did not mean doing everything. Sometimes, leadership meant trusting others to do their part. One afternoon, Wayne sat in his office reviewing a report when his phone vibrated. The message came from Amanda. "James wants to show you something after school." Wayne smiled immediately. He closed the report and stood up. A few years earlier, leaving work in the middle of the day would have felt impossible. Now it felt obvious. 40 minutes later, Wayne arrived near the small park where James usually played. James spotted him immediately. "Dad." The word came easily now, not as a new discovery, just part of their everyday life. James ran toward him holding a small model bridge made from wooden sticks. "I built this in science class." Wayne crouched beside him. "Tell me about it." James pointed excitedly. "The teacher said bridges have to balance weight." Wayne studied the structure carefully. "You did a good job distributing the supports." James grinned. "I knew you'd understand." Amanda stood nearby watching them. The scene had become familiar. James sharing ideas. Wayne listening carefully. But something about this moment felt deeper. Wayne wasn't just helping with experiments anymore. He was helping shape how James saw the world. They sat on the bench while James explained every detail of the bridge design. Wayne asked thoughtful questions. James answered each one with growing confidence. Finally, James leaned back and looked at Wayne. "You know a lot about solving problems." Wayne laughed softly. "I've had practice." James nodded. "Maybe I'll build big things one day." Wayne looked at the bridge again. "You might." James seemed pleased with that answer. Then he asked something unexpected. "Is your company still the biggest thing you built?" The question caught Wayne slightly off guard. For years, the answer would have been obvious. His company represented everything he had worked for, but now Wayne looked at the small wooden bridge in James's hands. Then he looked at the boy sitting beside him. Wayne shook his head slowly. "No." James frowned slightly. "What is then?" Wayne smiled. "This." James tilted his head. "What do you mean?" Wayne gestured gently between them. "Our relationship." James looked confused for a second. Wayne continued speaking calmly. "For a long time I believed success meant building something powerful." James listened. "But I was wrong about one thing," Wayne said. "What?" Wayne placed a hand lightly on James's shoulder. "The most important thing I've ever built isn't a company." James followed Wayne's gaze. Amanda stood a few steps away, watching quietly. Wayne finished the thought. "It's the life we're building together." James smiled slowly as the meaning began to make sense. Amanda looked down briefly, emotion flickering across her face. For years she had believed Wayne valued business above everything else. Now she could see something had truly changed. James suddenly held up the wooden bridge again. "Do you think it will hold weight?" Wayne examined it carefully. "Only one way to find out." James placed the bridge across 2 benches and carefully set a book on top. The structure held steady. James cheered. It worked. Wayne laughed. Yes, it did. Amanda walked closer and looked at the bridge too. Looks like a strong design. James looked proudly at both of them. Wayne stood up slowly. As he watched James celebrating his small success, Wayne realized something that had taken him years to understand. Success was never just about what you create. Sometimes success is about who you choose to show up for. And Wayne Johnson had finally learned that lesson. If this story meant something to you, think about this question. If you were in Wayne's position, what would you have done differently? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this speak to you, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to Mr. Gerald Family for more stories about life, choices, and second chances.